Everyone at the shooting range laughed at her old rifle, right up until the moment she pulled the trigger and made them all eat their words. You ever get that feeling? The one where you know you're being judged before anyone even says a word? That's exactly what Danielle Foster felt the second she stepped into the Sun Valley shooting range in Mesa, Arizona. She didn't have the look most people expected. No tactical boots, no jacket plastered with patches, no high-end rifle case or designer sunglasses perched on her head. Just a plain gray hoodie, scuffed-up sneakers, and a soft green backpack slung over one shoulder. The air smelled like oil and gunpowder, with the sharp cracks of gunfire echoing off concrete walls. Most folks were focused on their own targets, but a few heads still turned when Danielle walked in. The glances weren't hostile, but they weren't welcoming either. That subtle, tight-lipped smirk people were when they think they've already figured you out. Danielle kept her head down and made her way toward an empty lane near the back. With care, she unzipped her backpack and pulled out an old bolt-action rifle. It wasn't flashy or new. The wood was worn, the finish dull, but there was something timeless in the way it rested in her hands. At the counter, a tall man in a ball cap leaned over to another regular and whispered, not nearly quietly enough, "New girl looks like she brought a museum piece." They both chuckled, making no effort to hide it. Danielle heard them, of course, but she didn't react. She just loaded a few rounds with calm, steady hands. She knew places like this. She knew these kinds of people even better. And if they thought today was going to be predictable, they were in for a surprise. The first shot rang out, crisp, sharp, clean. No flair, no fuss. Just a single, perfect hole punched dead center into the target. Most people didn't notice, but one guy did. A young man in a red flannel shirt, maybe mid-20s, leaned from the next lane with a grin that oozed smugness. "Nice shot, Grandma," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't look at him. She just chambered the next round and fired again. Another bullseye. Still, she said nothing. Let them laugh. Let them assume. Talking had never taken her anywhere worth going. Whispers began to spread, soft at first, then louder. A woman in a tactical vest nudged her buddy and giggled under her breath. "Think she even knows what she's doing?" she asked. "Probably watched a YouTube video before she came in," her friend joked, chuckling. Danielle remained focused. Breathe in. Exhale. Squeeze. One hole after another, each one landing close enough to touch. A short, stocky man with a clipboard, probably the range manager, noticed the small crowd forming near her lane. With a forced grin, he approached. "You new here?" he asked, louder than needed. Danielle gave a small nod, eyes still on her target. "First time?" he asked again, chuckling like he didn't quite believe her. "Well, we're running a little friendly competition today. You're welcome to sign up, just for fun." There it was, the challenge dressed up like an invitation. Danielle clicked the safety on her rifle and leaned it gently against the booth wall. "Maybe," she said, her voice calm and even. The manager gave a polite nod, already dismissing her as he walked back toward the desk. But as Danielle picked up the pen to write her name on the sign-up sheet, something in the room shifted. The sheet was simple, a few names scribbled down, mostly regulars, mostly men, the kind of men who walked in like they already knew they'd win. Danielle held the pen for just a moment longer than she needed to, feeling the cool, hollow plastic between her fingers. And then she wrote. The pen felt awkward between her fingers. She hadn't competed in anything since the Army, hadn't even touched a rifle outside her small workroom in nearly 3 years. "You don't have to prove anything," she told herself. "You didn't come here for this." But then she heard again, that low hum of laughter from flannel shirt guy and his buddies. "But she can't even hit the broadside of a barn," he muttered, not bothering to keep his voice down. Danielle's fingers tightened. The pen pressed harder into the paper than she intended, her name scrawling across the bottom of the sign-up list, Danielle Foster. "You sure about that, ma'am?" the man with the clipboard asked, raising an eyebrow as she handed it back. "I'm sure," she replied, calm and steady. He gave a little shrug, the kind people give when they think they're doing you a favor by humoring you. "All right, we'll call your name when it's your turn. Good luck out there." Back at her booth, Danielle returned to her rifle. It was more than just a weapon. It was an old friend, a worn and trusted companion, battered but reliable. She ran a soft cloth over the scope, her hands working by instinct. As she focused on the details, an older woman with salt and pepper hair stopped beside her lane. Unlike the others, there was no smirk on her face. "You any good, honey?" she asked in a quiet voice. Danielle offered a faint smile. "Used to be." The woman chuckled, not mockingly, but with a knowing warmth. "Well, sometimes used to be is just sleeping. Not gone." Danielle nodded, quietly tucking the words into her back pocket like a lucky coin. The intercom crackled overhead. "All right, folks, gather up. Competition's about to start." The atmosphere changed. Targets were being reset, rifles cleaned and prepped. People stretched like they were about to step into a boxing ring. Danielle closed her eyes for a moment. In that instant, she could almost smell the red dust of Afghanistan. She could hear the voices in her earpiece, feel the bone-deep ache of old missions and long days. But when she opened her eyes again, all she saw was a clean paper target 100 yards out, waiting. She tightened the strap on her gloves. This wasn't about a prize, not really. It was about something she hadn't let herself feel in years. A young employee in a navy polo stepped up with a clipboard. "Jason Weller, you're up." Red flannel guy, Jason, winked at Danielle as he passed. "Watch and learn, sweetheart." He smirked, twirling his semi-automatic rifle for show. His shots rang out fast and loud. Decent accuracy. Enough to draw whoops and applause from the regulars. He strutted back to his seat with high fives all around. The next few shooters followed, some better, some worse. No one spectacular, but enough bravado to keep the crowd buzzing. Danielle kept her head down, silently cleaning the bore of her rifle one last time, checking every seam, every screw. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even angry. She just wanted it done. Then her name sliced through the chatter like a blade. Danielle Foster. The room didn't go silent, not exactly, but the sound dipped. That subtle drop in energy that always comes right before something important happens. She stood, slung her rifle over her shoulder. Her boots made soft, steady clicks on the concrete floor as she walked to the line. "But she doesn't even know how to load it," Jason muttered with a laugh. Someone mimed fumbling hands, pretending to drop an imaginary rifle. Snickers rippled through the crowd. Danielle didn't say a word. She placed her rifle on the bench, adjusted the scope, and squared her stance. Her movements were precise, automatic, muscle memory born of years she rarely allowed herself to think about. The rules were simple. 5 shots, moving targets, fast pace. Point for both accuracy and speed. "Whenever you're ready," the employee called. Danielle inhaled through her nose. Slowly let it out. The laughter, the chatter, the room itself, all of it tunneled away into silence. The moment the cameras turned toward her, everything else blurred. The first target zipped across from left to right. Danielle squeezed the trigger. One shot, dead center. The second target jerked upward, another round, straight through the heart. By the time the third target appeared, the shooting range had gone completely silent. No more jokes. No more snickers. Only stillness. Fourth. Fifth. Every bullet landed with the kind of precision that didn't just demand attention. It stunned it into silence. The fluidity of her movements made the whole thing seem almost surreal, as if it were staged. But it wasn't. It was just Danielle, calm, exact, unshakable. When she finished, she clicked the safety back on and stepped away from the booth like she was setting down a cup of coffee. No celebración. No big reaction. Just quiet control. At the front of the range, the manager cleared his throat awkwardly. Highest score so far," he muttered, glancing at the screen displaying a near-perfect tally. Jason stared at the numbers, his jaw slack. His friends shuffled beside him, suddenly very interested in floor tiles and wall posters. Danielle didn't gloat, didn't even smile. She simply picked up her rifle, slung it over her shoulder, and walked back to the benches. No eye contact, no swagger, just silence. But not just any silence. The kind that stays. The next shooter stepped up, but it was clear no one was watching them. Not really. Every loud bang that missed, every target that wobbled instead of dropped clean, It all only deepened the weight of what Danielle had just done. People who had laughed earlier were now watching her out of the corners of their eyes. Not with ridicule, but with something closer to unease, maybe even respect. A curiosity that felt awkward and heavy. Jason Weller sat stiffly with his friends, his jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles twitch. Every now and then, his gaze flicked toward Danielle, like he was trying to figure out who or what he'd just seen. Danielle sat still, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded loosely in her lap. Her rifle leaned against the wall beside her like it wasn't even important, like none of it had ever been. A woman in a pink camo hat approached, nervously holding out 2 coffees. "You want one?" she asked quietly. Danielle looked up and smiled, soft polite. "Thanks, but I'm good." The woman nodded quickly and hurried off, cheeks flushing. She hadn't offered a coffee to anyone else. Finally, the last names were called. The scoreboard blinked to life behind the counter, names and scores stacking up neatly. Danielle Foster sat at the very top. Cold, clean, undeniable. The manager stepped forward, clipboard in hand, trying to sound upbeat. "All right, looks like our winner today is Danielle Foster." He clapped, a little too fast. A few others joined in. Their applause awkward, unsure if they were supposed to cheer or apologize. Danielle stood, walked forward without a hint of bravado. The prize, a gift card and a cheap plastic trophy. She accepted them with a small nod, tucking both in her backpack like receipts from a grocery store. Someone near the back, probably one of Jason's friends, muttered under his breath, "She must have gotten lucky." Danielle paused. For the first time, she turned her head, just slightly, and then, loud enough for everyone to hear. Luck doesn't group shots like that. There it was. A flicker, just a flicker, of the fire she kept locked away. The one that only came out when it really mattered. No one laughed this time. No one even breathed too loudly. But deep down, Danielle knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the questions, of the whispers, of the wondering. The crowd dispersed quickly after that. Some packed up in silence. Others offered stiff nods as they passed. Like she was some kind of living legend they didn't quite know how to approach. Danielle didn't rush. She sat on the bench, slowly wiping down her rifle, her movements deliberate and calm. She could feel the tension in the air, the way conversations died out when she walked too close, the sideways glances people thought were subtle. Jason lingered near the lockers, pretending to rummage through his duffel bag. But he wasn't looking for anything. He was trying to understand. Jason kept glancing over, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't quite chew through the pride stuck in his throat. Finally, he pushed off from the wall and walked over, his boots scuffing loud against the concrete. "You military?" he asked, voice tight. Danielle didn't look up. Something like that. Jason shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. You shoot like someone who's been doing a long time." Danielle finally met his eyes. There was no anger there. No smugness. Just a steady, unblinking calm. "Long enough," she said. Jason opened his mouth like he wanted to ask more. What branch, what unit, how many tours? But something in her expression told him he wouldn't get answers. At least, not the kind he had any right to. Instead, he nodded and muttered, "Good shooting," before turning and walking stiffly back to his friends. Danielle zipped up the battered green case and slung her pack over one shoulder. The older woman from earlier, the one who had offered the coffee, passed by with a small wink. "Told you," she said gently. Sleeping not gone. Danielle allowed herself a rare smile. Outside, the late afternoon sun scorched the blacktop into heat waves. She didn't mind. She welcomed it. The weight, the shimmer, the silence. It was real. At her car, a weathered, dark blue Honda Civic, she heard footsteps again. Mom. It was the range manager, jogging to catch up, clipboard flapping against his side. "You ever think about competing professionally?" he panted. "We got contacts, real tournaments, big money, sponsorships. You've got serious potential." Danielle smiled politely as she unlocked her door. "Not interested." "You sure? With your skills?" "I didn't come here to prove anything to anybody." She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine. The soft rumble beneath her hands felt like a familiar heartbeat. As she pulled out, she glanced once in the rearview mirror. The range got smaller. The people faded into heat shimmer until everything disappeared into the horizon. And just like that, Danielle Foster melted back into the ordinary world. No medals, no headlines, no applause. Just a quiet woman carrying a weight few could name, let alone understand. But deep inside, she knew today wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who she still was, even after all this time. The road stretched long and open ahead of her, painted in hard gold and soft shadow by the setting sun. Danielle tapped her fingers lightly against the steering wheel, finding a rhythm to match her breathing. Calm, present. She wasn't angry at the people back there. Not really. They didn't know her story. Didn't know about the years she spent crawling through dust and concrete, breath caught in her chest, heartbeat thundering in her ears, waiting for a command she sometimes prayed would never come. They didn't know about the lives she'd had to take, or the ones she couldn't save, or the promises she'd whispered into the stillness afterward, when no one else was listening. No, they only saw what stood in front of them. And truth was, most people only ever see the surface. But Danielle knew better. She always had. Most people only understand what sits right in front of them. But every now and then, it feels good to remind the world. Strength doesn't always look like armor. And real skill, the kind you can't fake, doesn't need permission to exist. At a red light, Danielle glanced out the window. In a strip mall parking lot, a father was teaching his daughter how to ride a bike. The little girl wobbled, nearly tipping over, but the dad caught her with a laugh and a steady hand. Danielle smiled to herself. She'd done enough fighting for one lifetime. Now it was time to live small, live quiet. To find peace in the ordinary things that never make headlines. She turned the corner toward home. Her modest apartment with the creaky floors, the overgrown plant on the balcony, and the book she'd left half-finished on the kitchen table. In the back seat, the cheap plastic trophy clattered lightly with each bump in the road. Forgotten already. It didn't mean much. It never did. But the feeling she carried home, the quiet fire rekindled inside her, that was something no one could take away. Because no matter how much the world underestimated her, Danielle Foster knew exactly who she was. And that was enough. Maybe, just maybe, someone at that range would remember her the next time they thought they had someone all figured out. Never judge strength by what you see on the surface. Real power moves quietly. It doesn't ask for recognition, and it never has to shout.